right. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening here in South Africa, this afternoon in Eastern Canada, I guess. And today we have I think, an interesting guest. Wayne Humphries and I went to university together and studied biology together way back in what I called the previous millennium, and we lost touch after we finished university, and we rediscovered one another via Learn the Birds about 2 years ago or so. And what did we say? It was like 40 years or something since we saw each other.
You had a lot more hair then.
I did. And what I had was longer. Anyway, so Wayne, after doing lots of interesting things, had a successful career as a chief operating officer for a big Toronto-based real estate development company, and he retired from that, and he went back to university to complete a master's degree in environmental studies at York University in Toronto. And he worked on conservation policy in relation to environmental impacts on seabirds off Newfoundland. And Wayne lives in Port Blandford, Newfoundland, and I had the privilege of visiting him and his wife, Kay, when I was in Newfoundland in October. And so I've seen this window that the bird flew through that he was just talking about before it was open to the air. It's a beautiful place and a great place for birding. Now, Wayne's son and daughter are both ornithologists, and they both have, daughter-in-law are both ornithologists, and they've both presented on Learn the Birds in the past. And so this past austral summer, the southern summer, he volunteered with his son and daughter-in-law to pilot test the use of advanced drones for penguin population research in Antarctica. And that's what you're going to hear about today. And that's all I'm going to say. Over to you, Wayne.
There we go. So bear with me for a minute, because I tend to get a little bit nervous when I start off a presentation, and I tend to talk a little bit faster than normal people, I guess is my heritage or whatever. I try to jam in as much information as I can. So I was very fortunate because my son is a sort of a volunteer with Oceanites, and Oceanites is a firm located in New York that has been doing penguin research in the Antarctic now for close to 30 years. And I'll get a bit more into Oceanites in a second. So I'll talk a little bit about me, but I won't say much about me. And I'll talk a bit about Oceanites and what we do down there and how we do it, and the risk associated with even people like myself. I'm particularly for people like myself, because I'm turning 69 this summer, and as you get older, obviously your brain says you could do all kinds of things, but your body says, "Oh, back off for a second." And my hat is off to all those people that do work in the Antarctic, and I've been there firsthand, and I'm getting ready to go back again in 2 weeks for another 3 weeks of following up and doing what we did last year. So one of the things I want to talk about, and really it's more or less about myself, and it also applies to people like yourselves, and that is, if you got an itch to do something, you scratch it and you move on with it and you do it. And this actually is I came across this Weddell seal, and in fact, at the top left corner, there is a crab-eater seal, and on the other side of that, there's a fur seal. But basically, is if you got something that's on your mind that you want to do, then you need to get off your ass and do it. Life is getting short, and that was my position. I was driving home from work one day. I was, working in a real estate development company, and I said, "What the hell am I doing here?" Went home and told my wife that I just resigned, and then promptly went back and applied to university to do my master's in environmental studies at York University in Toronto. So essentially with me, it was in the right place at the right time. I had the right connections. And interestingly, I had the right skill set. And by that, I mean that I had my master's in environmental studies fresh. I also coincidentally had a drone license, and had my own drone. And this is at a time when Oceanites was just in the early stages. And I'm talking about last year of taking a look and pilot testing the use of drones for penguin research in the Antarctic. So it was all sort of came together. But it wasn't easy. You know, you have a passion to do something, and I guess a lot of it came from my own background, but also, you know, a little bit of history here. The bottom right corner is a boat called the um, uh, it's the SS. I got a brain fart here now. Um, she was the first boat. I'll remember it in a second. She was the first boat that actually broke into um, the Ross Sea, and she was actually a boat from Newfoundland. She came back from there, and she sank off the coast of Newfoundland with over 200 people, basically disappeared mysteriously. And two of those people that actually went down on the boat when she went down off Newfoundland were two of my great uncles. One was 21 and the other one was 19. So I think the link between that and Antarctica also tweaked my interest in Antarctica. But it wasn't easy also getting there. You know, I had to do something like 8 SCTW courses, which are shipboard courses, everything from firefighting to crowd control and so on. I also had to do an IATO certification, which is basically understanding a document that was about close to 700 pages. And I also had to get a Norwegian medical assessment as well. So at the end of the day, it all paid off. So Oceanites is the only research firm doing work in the Antarctic that is fully supported by public donations and operational partnerships. So it has no source of institutional funding whatsoever. It was started by a guy by the name of Ron Naveen, who was an environmental lawyer in New York. And Ron had been to the Antarctic and saw a need to undertake this type of research at a time when there was very little going on, particularly along the coast, along the Antarctic Peninsula. So Ron has a great team of people with him, a nice strong board, a lot of individuals who are dedicated to what they do. And Ron, has essentially kept this thing going for almost 30 years. This year is the 30th year for Oceanites doing penguin research in the Antarctic. So the mission basically is to support science-based conservation and climate change awareness. And they have been, like I said, they've been counting penguins in the Antarctic since 1994. And when I say counting penguins, is not counting individual penguins, but is actually counting nesting penguins. It's almost impossible to count penguins because they're moving around so much, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But basically, nesting penguins and chicks. And the way you do it is you essentially get into among these penguin colonies. In order to get in there, you have to have the necessary permits. And for example, on the boat, the vessel that I'm traveling on the 27th, there will only be 2 of us that will have the permits to fly drones inside of the penguin colonies, and also be able to walk in among the penguin colonies. So from that perspective, we're very, very fortunate, but it's very difficult to do your work without being able to get in among the colonies. One of the reasons why Ron and the team in the earlier years selected penguins is basically they're sort of near the top end of the food chain, but not quite there. Some of their biggest predators include killer whales, and you'll see lots of killer whales or orcas in the areas where we go, which are essentially from the northern tip of Antarctic Peninsula down almost to the Ross Sea. And as well, some of the penguins, particularly the gentoos, eat fish as well as krill, but the other two, Adelie, the two that I'm particularly involved with, which are Adelie and chinstrap, those two species primarily subsist on krill, and it does have an impact on their survivability, particularly in an area where krill populations fluctuate. Another predator of penguins in the Antarctic are the skuas, and I'll talk as well about that in a few minutes. So we can detect changes in by counting penguins, particularly penguins that are sitting on nests, because the survivability of chicks depend on food supply. It's also a function of weather conditions at the time and so on. So they're using essentially Antarctic penguins as the lenses to looking at the types of changes that you see in Antarctica. So the work that Oceanites is doing is basically right now they've got somewhere in the vicinity, as of last year, they had 2,400 counts at 235 sites, and it's the most wide-ranging penguin monitoring program in the world. To monitor population change over time, these changes can be sort of immediate or lagged, and I'll give you an example of an immediate change in a few minutes, which we witnessed last year, natural, and one of the biggest issues that we're likely having to deal with this year, and we see early signs of it, is the advent of avian influenza, which essentially started in Europe, swung around north, hit Newfoundland, Canada, and then hit the populations in South America, and more recently, it's now South Georgia Island, and there's been a case as well recently in Elephant Island. So it's reaching down into the Antarctic Peninsula, human-induced, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then there are those that are caused by cumulative impacts. And cumulative impact might be a combination of factors such that the population gets to a level where it can't sustain itself. So cumulative impact might be weather one year, lack of food the next year, and over time, then that has an impact on the viability of the colony or the subcolony. These are the locations where most of the work this year has been done. Where I spent most of last year was in the Central West, particularly around Anvers Island. Right now, we've got crews up here. The Octantis is here, finishing up. Actually, they just did drone surveys here. We have two more groups down here. One group is in this vicinity that have been doing drone work all week and doing manual penguin counts as well. And when I get down, I'll probably be in this area as well when I get down on the 27th. So the three major penguin colonies that we're focusing on in that particular area that where I'm headed are the Gentoo, and where I was last year, Gentoo, chinstrap, and Adelies. They're all about the same size, and they're in that group that we call the brush-tail penguins. So brush-tail, so you can see the tail flicking here, and what it's doing is actually flicking the debris, primarily penguin poop and other types of debris. But you can see it flicking his tail. It's not waving to me. But they're very curious little critters. This one pops up now and has a look at me, and then it's gone. But what's incredible is the difference in the speed. I had trouble trying to keep up with these penguins shooting through the water with the camera, and I knew they were going to shoot. But the speed that they're going at is just phenomenal underwater compared to what they are walking. Oops, sorry. So potential man-made changes, and the biggest one, man-made change, other than the sort of environmental changes or impacts that we talk about, plastics and so on. One of the bigger ones, particularly in the Antarctic Peninsula, is tourism visitations. And you can see the locations where we have penguin colonies on the in this area where we're doing research. And then you can see the red, which is where a lot of these cruise ships are going. And this is where you're finding most of the cruise ship visitations, in these dark red areas here. And the other impact is obviously fishing pressure on the krill populations and silverfish and so on. And these are fairly significant in the Antarctic. So this was a screenshot to give you some idea of tourism visitations. This was a screenshot sent to me about 45 minutes ago. So one of our guys, one of our teams are on this boat here. And these are vessels in close proximity. These are all cruise ships. And then I went and I grabbed a screenshot shot of AIS, which tracks every cruise ship going into the Antarctic, has to have a transponder on board and report, and the positions are reported. These are the cruise ships that are currently operating between the southern tip, Ushuaia, and as well, there's 5 ships in Ushuaia at dock, loading up again, offloading passengers and picking them up. So you can see the volume of cruise ships that are in this along the Antarctic Peninsula. And all of these, there's a IATO, which is the treaty organization that controls activity and movement in Antarctica, are a very stringent criteria on the with respect to these boats in terms of when they can go ashore, slots for when they can go and take their visitors into the various colonies and so on in these anchorages that are located all along here. And also the size of vessel. No vessel greater than carrying greater than 500 passengers is allowed to stop in Antarctica, and no more than 100 people on shore at any given time. Plus, the ratio of staff to visitors on shore is to be not less than 1 in 20. So another impact on penguins is predation, and this is one of the more popular ones, which is the leopard seal, which popped up on the last trip. And these patrol the penguin colonies and are quick to grab a quick meal of penguin, and are even more active when the chicks start entering the water. Leopard seal, fur seal as well, but my understanding is that the fur seal is not as aggressive. It's aggressive on land, but not as aggressive with respect to taking penguins. The other critter that actually is very, very active with respect to predation of penguins, particularly chicks and eggs. And it's quite fascinating watching how these work. And normally they work in pairs. So what will happen if there's a gentoo sitting on the nest is flat, one will go in front of the penguin, irritate it. The penguin sort of pops up almost to a semi-standing position, and the other skua will either grab a chick or grab an egg. And you'll see lots of these around around just about all of these colonies. It's very unusual for a skua to take a full-grown adult penguin. So this is a picture I took last year, and it's almost certainly a one that succumbed on the way up to the colony. It was about halfway down the hill from where from the water up through. So another issue is environmental, and is environmental in a couple of different ways. More recently, in the last couple of years, I've had so many people ask me questions. What's this green and what's this pink on the glaciers? And it's becoming an issue. It's referred to commonly as snow algae, and it typically is in close proximity to the penguin colonies or within 3 kilometers of the coast. And you're finding a major explosion of snow algae along the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula. And what happens is because of environmental change, you're getting, when it warms up, you get this layer of water that forms just above the snow, water crystals. And that algae, in fact, then attaches itself to that water crystal and it basically grows and thrives off the nutrients that it's picking up that are blown in from the sea or coming from penguin colonies. And it's becoming a problem because it creates a barrier of the snow and it creates additional heat. And from what I understand, it results in additional melt. So one of the issues that we ran into last year, and this is at a major impact, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, is snow. These penguins, these particularly three penguins, prefer to have, they build their nests on small pebbles, basically to keep them out of the water. The last count that was done of penguins in the Antarctic was 2019, and that's because we ended up with COVID. So nothing happened in the Antarctic. So last year when we went back, same site, this picture here is taken just to the left of this one. And this is essentially snow covered. Here you see perfectly dry and so on. But this is small compared to what's down underneath the hill here. And Grant took this picture simply because he had a picture of it from there in 2019. Grant was my son. And I grabbed this picture this year, taken from almost the same site. And you'll see this a bit more. So this is what we ran into this year. So essentially deep snow, penguins trying to hatch in these kinds of weather conditions, snow. And the problem is that it's not cold snow. It's sloppy, wet snow. And where Grant is standing here right now, in 2019, this was all bare and this was covered with penguins. This was all nesting area. This year, there wasn't a chick to be seen this entire area. And what he's doing is he's looking down over the ridge to see if there's anything in these sort of rock outcrops. So there is the Antarctic inventory, scientific inventory that focuses on, and that's where all the data gets for our penguin counts and counts from other researchers in different parts of the Antarctic go into this inventory of that people can access publicly. So basically it's focused on core sites, and we get into these core sites essentially by expedition ships and cruise ships. Expedition ships are not that many in the Antarctic. I'm talking about, for example, we've got a crew that's leaving today on the Protector, the HMS Protector, which is the British research and cutter that's operating in the Antarctic. She's actually in Ushuaia. They should be in Ushuaia tomorrow, and they just left the UK today to catch that boat. And the other one is remote sites where a lot of the cruise ships don't go, a lot of the expedition ships don't go, and the only way to get in those places are by small boats. So we monitor basically key sites at key times, and we're gathering data in a very cost-efficient way. So I'm not advertising. Sorry, you Viking here. The only reason I'm raising as I'm here is I want to make a point that we have a really good relationship with Viking and in terms of being able to get into the Antarctic. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And that's the, sorry. So this is the Octantis, Viking Octantis, has a sister ship called the Viking Polaris. Listen, if you're going to go into the Antarctic as a researcher, you're not going to get better accommodations than what are provided on these ships. You know, it's almost an embarrassment, really, for us to be on it. But, you know, I'll take the good with the bad. So this is a Weddell seal. I took this picture, I think, coming back to the boat one time last season. So we use basically these ships to get to the Antarctic. And this here, the quick video I did crossing the Drake Passage. And this is not too bad weather. It's been much worse, and you do get incidents um, on the crossing the Drake Passage. Accidents do happen, but nothing that would should deter anybody from going down. It's basically an adrenaline experience for people that like the water. Oops. So what is it we get from Viking? So Viking and other cruise ships as well. So we get and all of this is provided to us at no charge. So Viking pays for our accommodations. Viking assigns operators to us. Basically, we have whatever we want for the most part within reason. The Octantis and Polaris and several other cruise lines as well provided to us. And some of these tools are invaluable. Obviously, the Zodiacs we use for going to shore. We have our accommodations and work areas. This is a full-blown scientific lab, which is on the Octantis. And this baby is a little beaut. This is, we call them special ops boats. There are two very powerful engines. They were initially built, or these were designed for the Norwegian Special Forces by some company in Finland. And outfitted for the Antarctic. So this one also has a mini sub on board, but we don't need the mini sub, obviously. This is how we offload off of in the Zodiacs. Sorry, this is the boat being offloaded. We get aboard through a port that's right at a door right at water level. So this is us going ashore at a penguin colony. This is called. This is, I don't know which one this one is right now, but all I know is I climbed when I got ashore. To give you some idea of perspective on height here, that little dot right there would be roughly about the size of what I would be standing up, to give you some idea of perspective of size. So when we were coming in, picking our way in through here, we thought, because it was foggy up here, we weren't really sure, but it looked like penguins up here. So by the time we couldn't get the drone up here because it was too wet and misty up at the top. So I basically climbed up along the ridge here, along the side, on my hands and knees, because it was just too risky to stand up and claw because of the slope. And I got up here, I went across here, then came back down here, jumped across there, then came down here, and this is a really steep incline coming down here. And the only way for me to get down was to sit on my ass, slide down through about 6 to 8 inches of penguin shit. And by the time I got down, there was no one that would go near me because of the smell, but I had no choice. That's the way I came down. So this is us. This is my son Grant in front, and I'm behind. We're not sure we're even going to get in here.
I think it's going to get better and better.
Probably will.
Once the water starts to rise.
Clear out that way.
Well, I don't see any other way in there.
But it's going to be more shallow, so it's going to be less ice closer to land, I guess.
Yeah, we get that piece is fine, and then we can walk around.
So here's the issue that we have when we go in a place like this. You got a lot of moving ice, and we are operating on the basis that because the tide is changing, that place is going to be cleared out by the time we leave. And we're going to be in there for probably 3 to 4 hours by the time we count all the penguins up along the ridge. So it's a concern that you have when you go in there, because the boat drops you off and it's got to go about doing its own thing and comes back. So now this is the special ops boat. And here we're leaving. This is about 6 o'clock in the morning. We are leaving here to go about 6 miles out the bay, out of sight of the cruise ship, in weather that is not terribly great. You can see we're bundled up here. It's damp. 1 minute is sloppy snow, the next minute is wind, and so on. So this is really for adrenaline junkies like ourselves, right? On the way out, this is where you have to have 100% confidence and faith in your driver. You're heading out in what essentially is the middle of nowhere, and you're navigating through chunks of ice, miserable weather. And now we're getting close to Gaston Island, which is where we know there's a chinstrap penguin colony that hadn't been counted in many years. So we get out here, and the problem is we can't land. This is the island. We know there are penguins up there because we can see the discoloration on the snow where they're nesting, and we can also see the penguin eyeways going up where these penguins basically track up the top. But again, you see lots of ice, and there's so much wave action around this island that we can't land. So we circle around, and we decide that the only way we're going to get a count on this is to fly the drone. And this, in fact, will be the first time that we've flown drones from boats in this kind of weather. And here's some chin straps in the water. They're very curious little creatures coming out and checking us out. And we'll just move on here. So we've flown the drone, and all of a sudden the weather sucks in, the wind comes up. Problem is, how do we get this drone down? It's not supposed to be up in rain. You can see the rain coming in. So I turned the controls over to Grant and said, it's a $10,000 drone. You're with Oceanites. I'm not. You land it. And so I start filming. And then when he gets it down so far, you can see the boat is moving around. So I drop the camera and go around the other side and try to catch the drone as it coming in. We landed it. It got it down. Okay, so we know the kinds of services that we get from Viking, and what is it Viking gets in return? Obviously, they get a little bit of kudos from the fact that they're participating in a fairly significant environmental research program, but to a large extent, we become embedded with the Octantis expedition crew. So keep in mind, on these boats, there is a team of people that are strictly, their job is to get the guests the best experience they possibly can. So that means getting them into the penguin colonies. It means lectures. It means being available for questions and that sort of thing. So we become embedded with them in a sense that we are a resource to these people as well. So every evening we would attend a meeting, not necessarily an orientation, but it's a meeting. Okay, how did things go today? And what are we doing tomorrow? Who's doing what? And all this kind of stuff. So that's one part of it. We also give lectures. Here we're doing one on the drones. Over here, we are actually gearing up to go with the expedition team to shore early in the morning, because when these guys go in to set up, and ladies go in to set up their gear for guests coming ashore, they will probably drop us off at a colony on the way in if it's nearby. If not, we'll take one of the other boats and go in. we on board. We take part in the wildlife survey. So every day, this individual right here, who I've got the pointer on, is actually a contract employee with the Canadian Wildlife Service here in Canada, and he's the onboard resident ornithologist. And so we will all take our turns doing wildlife surveys, and all the sightings that we see, particularly with respect to birds, are reported to eBirds at the end of the trip. We also are out on deck if anybody has any questions. And this is actually coming out to Beagle Channel, so it's actually quite nice, and everybody are nice and warm and toasty and all that kind of stuff. So, people are asking questions. They probably see a whale or something like that, and they'll ask questions about it or whatever. We're doing another short lecture. They have this expedition desk. So, we'll take our turns at the expedition desk and assist where we can. And we also do lectures on board as well. We usually do two. One is, this is a pretty big theater. It can handle about 400 people. So we will do our lectures. Grant doing a presentation on the, I think this is on the beginning, or two of us are doing it really. And then we do one at the end, which summarizes the research findings that we have. So we also operate as guides. The expedition team who are looking after the guests are oftentimes just need a break, and we take our turn and we guide. So this is a group that I took out. I think I did 8 guiding trips, I think, in the special ops boat. And here I'm taking a crew out, these people pay for this, so you can see they're all bundled up. So I'm actually taking them out to a chinstrap colony. I'm not landing, but I'm basically just going by the shoreline, and also there's a couple of whale sightings nearby, so took them out to that and a few other places around. So you do some interpretation. They ask you all kinds of questions and so on. So how do we count the penguins? So it's the old days, it was essentially manual counting. You had a little clicker, you counted each group 3 times, and if your counts were within 5% of each other, you take the average of them. Problem is what happens when you see this, and this is not uncommon. And you still have to do a manual count. So what you do is you mentally look for natural divides in the groups. So for example, if I was doing this count, I would probably take that string that's down through there and cross there, and I would count the number of nesting penguins in that, and I would look for natural divides, because it's impossible to grid it out in these sorts of counts. So recently, obviously, you've had the emergence of remote sensing and satellite imagery, and last year we started using drones, which have a 3D camera on it plus a thermal camera. And so here is Grant bringing in the drone after doing a survey of this colony. And I won't go through it all because I don't know how the time is holding it, how much time I've got. So I want to get to the results section. So he's bringing the drone in. The penguins, for the most part, are totally oblivious to us walking around and even flying the drones. The requirement for a height of drones in the past was 30 meters. This year it's increased to 50 meters above the colony. So it's a bit more stringent this year. So this is a little promo video that was put together by Oceanites last year. Now, purely coincidentally, that area that was surveyed by the first use of drones was called the Humphries Plateau. And we did not know that until we came back. Not me, because I wasn't on this trip. Actually, Alex, my daughter-in-law, and Grant were the first two, and both of them were named Humphreys on the Humphreys Plateau. Well, the odds of that happening is slim to none. So we were waiting. You remember the video? We were trying to pick our way through shore. So we had some time waiting for a boat to come back, pick us up, wait till the ice cleared. So I said to Grant, there was a little bit of ice offshore. Let's test out the drone and see what sort of resolution we can get. And we were just, whoops, sorry. We were just floored at the resolution of the drone at 30 meters. You can actually see the deep into the water. You can see even the various crevices in the iceberg or the bergy bit. And we just did this a little demonstration. Now, we do add the software and where you can actually just change the orientation of all of this and tip it and turn it and go around it and so on. But my laptop is not powerful enough for it. So when we talk about risks to ourselves, this little brat here is a fur seal. And even though the leopard seals, you know, there has been one fatality involving a researcher in the Antarctic with the leopard seal that grabbed a diver. There's only one fatality I know of, but these are probably the most aggressive of all seals that I've ever seen. You do not get in between this and the water of a fur seal because you're going to come out on the worst end of it. I'm mapping water in this case is down here and I'm nice ways back and I'm taking this with a telephoto lens. Obviously, another risk that we run into is this guy is leaving. He just dumped us off and he may or may not be back in 3 hours because it depends on what happens with this ice. Fortunately, we were correct in the way the tide was going that it was going to clear out, but this is when he was leaving. So when the two of you are left on a shore and you know you look at the boat being a couple of kilometers off in the distance, you get this feeling in the knot of your stomach that makes you feel very, very lonely. Another issue that we run into is this is actually all penguin shit. This is like down here, it's maybe 1.5 feet. So I went up, counted, how the hell do I get back down? And it's an issue because it's so slippery. And keep in mind, you are 600 miles away from an injury. Even though these boats have you know, an extremely good clinic, they have operating table and all this kind of stuff. Last thing you want is a twisted ankle or broken leg or something like that. So essentially I just had to pick my way down here and figure out, even then that's like probably 2-3 feet down to here, is how to get down here safely. And when you get to someone of my age, you don't want broken bones. Weather is another one factor. The weather can change for us. I've shown this because in a minute, these are Gentoo penguins walking down their little penguin highway. I'm off to the side. They ignore me. But in a minute, this turns, you'll start seeing the snow fall now in front of the lens. And all of a sudden, we went from a nice day to, even though we had fall weather gear on, to being soaking wet in a period of about an hour. And you start seeing the snowfall here now. And this is when the expedition crew came back to pick us up. And going back, I don't think any of us were dry. You can see how wet Grant's pants are. I'm soaked. I was cold. I was shivering. I got back to the ship. I emptied the water out of my boots. Every single item of clothing that I had on was soaking, and I was like shivering. And we all were. There's no such thing as fall weather gear that's 100% proof. And the water was coming in over this boat because we were so loaded down with gear. So I can talk a little bit about penguins. I mean, we all, and I'm not going to talk a lot about this because most of you know a fair bit about this. I mean, they basically have 1 to 3 eggs a year. Some of them actually will, if they have an unsuccessful initial lay, they will try for the second clutch. Particularly with Gen2s, the other ones are a bit more difficult. Variable time of breeding. They move around between different mates, but they have strong site fidelity, and that is they like going back to the same sites as where they were, previously born. Particularly chinstrap and Delhi Gen2s are a little bit more wandering around, and sometimes you will find a young chick like a chinstrap, for example, in a colony that's a Gen2 colony, just wandering around sizing things up. So they're very highly adapted to swim, counter shaping, short, stiff feathers, which are the brush tails, particularly for these. Most of them have, all of them have stiff tails, but the other ones are just particularly categorized simply because of the size of the tail in relation to the size of the body. They're very adept at stealing stuff from other neighbors. They're lazy. They'll bring all these rocks up from the beach or wherever they can find them, but they have no problems with going over and borrowing from a neighbor or whatever. And this is not a stick, by the way, because there are no sticks in the Antarctic. This is actually the feather, one of the brushtail feathers. So he takes it and brings it back to his nest and offers it to the mate. And for the nest, there is a gift. Stealing, this one has stolen an egg, a rock from another nest and is going back and building his own nest. And the reason why I say borrow is because someone else will come along and probably take a rock from this one. So shared parenting is very common with penguins, and cretching, which is when the penguins get to a certain stage, they'll bundle up together, and that's more of a safety issue, safety in large numbers, and that's very common later in the season. So it's ecstatic displays. You'll see this very common when you're down there. They stick their neck straight up in the air and make this screeching sound. So here are some of the results from last year. Last year was a very unusual year for us because we were, in fact, we had unusual weather. It was a lot of snow in the areas where we were, very wet, and the results showed it. Move beyond that. So the peak count in December of, which was in December of 2014 of Gen2s, is 2,550. Count in December of 6, so it was a significant drop in the Gen2 population at Des Moines. But last year when we did it, it had increased dramatically, but still well below the peak periods. Rongi Island East, which is where we were having trouble getting ashore, peak count was 531, last count was 230, this count was 329. Some modest improvement, but still nowhere near the peak counts. Gaston Island, which is where we flew the drone over and used a drone to count the chin straps. Last count was 399, 2003 count, rest was many years before that. It was 226. So we see a drop in the chin strap colony. Donat or Mickelson Harbor, one of the issues we had here, and we still don't understand it, is why in the previous years this entire section here was covered in penguins. Last season when we were down there, there was none there to be seen. And so peak count was 1226, last count, and this count last year, 2023, was 677. So it was a significant drop in penguins, and that's from this section right here. So overall, 2.4% per year increase in Gen2s, and we're seeing delis and chin straps drop, and there's obviously a concern, and the speculation is that the populations are declining because they're unlikely to relay and they're essentially krill specialists, single species. So if you've got overfishing or an issue with the the krill biomass, then you've got issues related to both chin strap and Adelies are finding the effects of it. Gen 2s, expanding population and range. They're opportunistic colonizers. They're more likely to relay, and they're less specialized. So generality or generalists seem to be doing better than specific or specialists, and that seems to be what's happening there. So what do we do? Basically, I don't really need to go a lot into this. Basically, it's a little bit about Oceanites again. They're very much a lobbyist. They're part of CAMLR. One of the additional tasks that we've taken on this year is Oceanites as a working relationship with a number of research organizations in the Antarctic, including IATO, and through a program called MAPD here, which is available to the public, they can actually go, they are actually now recording the number of confirmed, probable unconfirmed HPAI incidents in the Antarctic is now, I think, down to about right here somewhere. So you can go on there and you can see the various report sightings of avian influenza as it moves. So right now it's primarily into the skua population and also into, I think there was one king penguin that was, last time I looked, was confirmed, and also the elephant seal population is getting hammered. So it seems to have transitioned away from birds to mammals as well. So we're expecting to see it hit the Antarctic Peninsula into the bird colonies, particularly particularly those that are colony nesters. Here we're talking about penguins in particular. Don't need to go to that. So we also do outreach and so on. This is a great television series. Now, it's too bad I didn't put the link for this, and I think you can still get it on YouTube. It's a PBS NewsHour series done on Antarctica, and a big part of this were the Oceanites team, including Grant as well. In this, I think the session was about an hour long. Adapting, so that we know that Gen 2s are adapting to sustainable behaviors. So I think I'll leave it at that there now. And I don't know where I am with time. We can talk about birds, but that's basically it. I don't know if Derek is still around or what time it is.
I'm still alive. And
so I've done way too much talking there, and
well, you kept me awake because I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, and it's 8 o'clock now. So my body is saying sleep, 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 and I stayed awake. So that's good.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, you got used to that from the university days.
It's been a long time since then, though.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you've got questions for Wayne, you can ask them in the chat. And somebody was having a screen issue. Is there a special footwear cleaning once you get back to the boat? That's the first question.
The protocols were there last year and they were followed. You definitely have to go through a sanitation procedure. You also have to go through a sanitation procedure before you go. Everything has to be, they'll take any gear that you're going ashore with, for example, even the Velcro on your jackets are scrubbed with a brush, like a very heavy brush. Every seam is picked through. Your clothes are all decontaminated. This year, because of the advent, the concerns about avian influenza, the protocols are much more rigid. And that is, you have to do a pre-survey before anybody goes ashore. So we would have to do a drone survey. And if we find any dead animals at all, the site is shut down. we would be allowed back in, but we have to be decontaminated before we go. We, again, the same procedures. We have to wear a mask, and when we come back, we get sprayed down. Everything gets decontaminated again, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's everybody going on shore has to go through a procedure. Other than, I think, because we're in among the penguins, we have to be a bit more conscientious of it. Is there a screen issue? I'm not seeing anything. No issues here. Special
Sorry, I'm
footwear.
talking on mute. Yeah, Elizabeth Zakarian in the chat. She was the one who did the webinar last time,
Yeah,
last month.
yeah, it's
Can you
excellent
comment
presentation.
on krill overfishing?
Yeah, there's a fair number of countries that operate outside of IATO that that fish for krill and other fish, and it's quite significant fishing effort that's just off the coast of on the northern coast of the Antarctic, particularly along the Antarctic Peninsula. I think China is one of the bigger ones with the fishing fleets in there. And it's obviously a big concern, it's for sure. Along with the days with sunlight, I think we're running then about, it was late at 6 and it was at least 11 o'clock at night before it got dark. Never really got completely dark. So the port is Ushuaia, Ushuaia, which is in the southern tip of Argentina. All the ships leave Ushuaia. You fly, like for example, when I leave here, I will fly from here to Toronto, Toronto to Santiago, Chile, to Buenos Aires, and then Buenos Aires to Ushuaia, and catch the boat there. Very few of these cruise ships go from New Zealand simply because of the distance to get there. It usually takes, I think, 5 days, whereas here, a day and a half, you're across. So the majority go out of expedition ships and so on, go out of Ushuaia. Let me see. I think that's all the questions, right? Working in this cold environment, do you get? Put it this way: they have incredibly sweet desserts on board, and I made sure that when I ate when I ate my main meal, I left room for the desserts. And I came back out of there with not gaining any weight. I would have at least 3 desserts per meal. And the reason why is because you're out, particularly when you're moving on the water. You were as miserable as you are ever going to get. I had thermal wear on, then I had more gear on top of that, and then I had foul weather gear on the outside of that. And even then you were chilly when the boat was moving across the water. When you got on shore, it wasn't so bad unless the weather changed and then you got wet. When you got wet, it was miserable. But when you're on the boat as a passenger, for example, you don't have the same exposure because you're only out for 20 minutes. So you don't have time to get that. You don't have time to get that cold. You know, when you're a passenger, you feel the effects of it, but it doesn't get into your bones and you know, the other parts of your body. You know, it's something you got to put up with. So average diversity. Surprisingly, the Antarctic has very little diversity when it comes to birds. I sort of look at breaking the Antarctic into, sort of trip into Antarctic is into 4 zones, and that is onshore in Ushuaia. You'll see, you know, birds in some of the ponds and your typical passerines and so on, and a few ducks and so on. And then you get out into the Beagle Channel, you'll get the Magellanic penguins, and you'll start seeing albatrosses and, you know, the shags and so on. But then when you get out into the Drake Passage, you don't know what you're going to see. You don't get a lot of diversity, but you get a lot of unusual birds. You certainly get different types of albatrosses, prions, and so on, petrels. and you see them, and you could probably crossing maybe see 20 to 25 different species in the crossing, maybe a bit more. And then when you get into the Antarctic, you don't have a lot of species. Snow petrel, you get the what they call the Antarctic chicken and so on. Which is sheathbill, snowy sheathbill. You get some of the petrels, but not a lot of diversity. Maybe, I don't know how many species you're talking about, certainly less than 20 species on the Antarctic Peninsula that I've seen anyway. Probably plus or minus. There might be some more than that, but not a lot more than that. But they're rarities, right? There's the only place where you're going to see them is on the, it's not like you're going to see them anywhere else. What are some of the general key travel do's and don'ts while in this environment? One is dress appropriately. Like if you're on the research side, dress appropriately, layered, make sure you've got fall weather gear on, and for God's sake, watch your steps, because there are some things that are out of your control. If you're on the boat, on the ship, and there's a major accident, well, there's not much you're going to be able to do with that. It's not, you listen to what people are saying. But if you're out on the Zodiacs or onshore, most of these areas are very, very slippery because of penguins. And those are the only areas where you're going to be going ashore. If you're going down, obviously things like health insurance, all of those kinds of things about. What a lot of cruise ships require would be make sure you've got a helicopter evacuation endorsement and so on. There's it's like I said, it's fun. You feel like you're making a contribution to something. And at my age, you're on the other end of the equation here. So for me, it's an opportunity that very, very few people get. It's particularly at my age. Anything else? Nope.
I think we can call it a day. I think you've done a really good job, and really appreciate your presentation, Wayne, and people liked it as well. So awesome.
Awesome. Good.
And we will get it up on YouTube. I don't know when. I am away from tomorrow until Sunday, and then again next week Thursday for little over 2 weeks. But I will try to get it up in those 3 days when I'm back.
Awesome. Good.
Right.
Okay, sir.
Thanks very much. And this is the last of the webinars for the year. We'll be back in January with the Learn the Birds team, talking about our birding experiences during the holidays. Take care, everyone, and thanks for your support.
Bye now.
Bye, Wayne. Thanks.
Bye now. Thanks, everybody.